One freezing winter in Riverbend, a homeless 10-year-old girl named Emily lived under a bridge with her injured canine dog, Ranger. When a powerful millionaire tried to buy Ranger to hide his crimes, Emily refused, protecting both her only family and the hidden evidence in his collar. Through danger, chases in the snow, and the help of Deputy Jack Morgan, the truth came to light and justice was served. In the end, the community came together to give Emily and Ranger a real home, and she found a new dream of becoming a canine handler to honor the dog who had saved her. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel to watch the next videos by clicking the subscribe button right below the video. Thank you. Amen. The winter in Riverbend, Colorado was a biting thing that gnawed through layers of clothing and settled deep into the bones. Snow lay in uneven drifts along the frozen banks of the Platte River, and the wind howled beneath the massive steel bridge that spanned its icy width. Gray skies pressed low overhead, and the air smelled faintly of exhaust from the highway above, mingling with the sharp metallic tang of the river. This was where Emily Carter had made her home for the past 4 months, a narrow pocket of space beneath the bridge's supports, shielded from the worst of the wind by a wall of scavenged plywood and old blankets. Emily was 10 years old, though anyone looking at her might have guessed younger. She was small for her age, with a wiry frame that spoke more of endurance than strength. Her light brown hair, cut jaggedly with a pair of dull scissors she'd found in a dumpster, stuck out in uneven tufts from beneath a knit cap so frayed it had more holes than fabric. Her gray eyes were large, watchful, and older than they should have been, a consequence of too many nights spent listening for footsteps in the dark. Life on the streets had carved a certain wariness into her. She trusted slowly, and even then, only halfway. But there was one creature in the world she trusted completely. Ranger lay beside her now, his head resting on her knee. He was a 6-year-old German shepherd, the kind bred for intelligence and strength. His sable coat, black along the saddle, fading into deep tan on his legs, was thick and healthy in spite of their rough living. His left hind leg was wrapped in a weathered bandage, the joint stiff from an injury sustained in his previous life as a canine police dog. He had served with distinction in Denver until the incident, a warehouse raid gone wrong, left him with a torn ligament and a limp. Declared unfit for duty, he had been scheduled for euthanasia until Emily's late father, a patrol officer, had adopted him. That had been before the accident that took both her parents and left Emily adrift. Ranger had been her constant ever since. To Emily, he was more than a dog. He was the last piece of her family. Her single goal now was simple, unshakable: keep Ranger safe, no matter what. They shared warmth beneath a patchwork of thrifted blankets, Emily absently stroking the fur behind Ranger's ear while listening to the muffled roar of cars above. The day had been quiet so far. No one had come down the access path to their spot under the bridge, and the city's patrol officers hadn't swept the area in over a week. She hoped it would stay that way. The crunch of footsteps on snow reached her ears long before the man came into view. Emily's body tensed. Her hands slid from Ranger's ear to his collar. The man who appeared around the curve of concrete was nothing like the other vagrants or occasional joggers who stumbled into her hidden space. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, and carried himself with a deliberate, measured stride. His hair was dark brown, perfectly styled, despite the wet snow falling in slow, heavy flakes. A charcoal wool overcoat hung over a tailored navy suit, the cut of it expensive enough that Emily recognized quality even if she couldn't name the brand. In one gloved hand, he carried a sleek black briefcase, in the other, a folded leather wallet. Charles Whitmore was a name that often appeared in the local paper, though Emily didn't know that. At 49, he was the founder and CEO of Whitmore Freight Solutions, the largest logistics company in the state. Publicly, he was known for his philanthropy-generous donations to hospitals, scholarships for underprivileged youth. Privately, he carried an air of calculation that never seemed to thaw, even when he smiled. His sharp blue eyes missed nothing, and those who worked under him said he made decisions like a man moving chess pieces, always thinking 3 moves ahead. Today, those eyes were fixed on Ranger. "That's quite a dog you've got there," Charles said, his voice smooth, pitched low, as if they were already in the middle of a conversation. He stepped closer, and Ranger's ears went back. A deep growl rumbled in his chest. Emily tightened her grip on his collar. "He's not for sale," she said flatly. Her voice was hoarse from the cold, but steady. Charles crouched down, ignoring the growl. From his coat pocket, he pulled out a neat stack of bills, crisp and green even in the dim light under the bridge. "I'll make you an offer anyway," he said. $5,000. Cash, right now." Emily's eyes widened, then narrowed. $5,000 might as well have been $5 million to her. She imagined what it could buy. A room in a real apartment, food that wasn't canned or donated, heat that came from vents instead of a burn barrel. But the thought of Ranger leaving her side made her stomach twist. "I said he's not for sale," she repeated, more force in her voice this time. Charles studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The cold puffed his breath into pale clouds, but he didn't seem to notice. "You could have a better life," he said finally. "A warm bed, a roof over your head. That's more than this bridge can give you." Emily felt her cheeks burn not from the cold, but from the implication. "I don't care. He's mine." The corner of Charles's mouth lifted, though it wasn't quite a smile. He slipped the bills back into his pocket and rose to his full height. "Think about it," he said, turning away. His voice carried easily in the open space under the bridge. "I'll be back." Emily watched him go, her pulse pounding. Ranger pressed closer to her leg, the warmth of his body grounding her. She didn't understand why the man wanted her dog so badly, but she knew one thing for certain. She would never let Ranger go. Outside, the snow continued to fall, dusting the frozen river in white. Emily pulled the blankets tighter around them, her eyes fixed on the path where Charles had disappeared. Winter in Riverbend was cruel, but she had weathered worse, and she wasn't about to lose the only family she had left. The next morning in Riverbend broke with a pale, reluctant sun peeking over the frost-rimed rooftops. Beneath the iron bridge, the cold still clung stubbornly to the shadows, turning Emily's breath into ghostly clouds each time she exhaled. The snow from yesterday had crusted over in the night, crunching sharply underfoot when she stepped outside their makeshift shelter. Ranger was already awake, his amber eyes scanning the riverbank, ears twitching at each sound above them. The limp in his hind leg seemed worse today, though he didn't let it slow him as he padded closer to her. Emily crouched to scratch his neck, her fingers brushing against the thick leather of his old K9 collar. It was a sturdy piece of gear, scuffed but still solid, with faded letters on a brass tag that read, "Denver PD, Unit 7. Her thumb caught on something inside the seam, a tiny raised edge beneath the stitching. Frowning, she worked her fingers into the narrow gap and felt metal. With a tug, a small object popped free, a USB drive, slim and black, no bigger than her thumb. She stared at it, confusion prickling through her. "What's this, boy?" she murmured. Ranger tilted his head as if he understood, his breath puffing in the cold. She remembered stories her father once told her about K9s seizing evidence during raids, sometimes literally carrying it away in their mouths. Maybe this was from that warehouse night when Ranger had been injured. Her pulse quickened. Could this be what that man Charles wanted? Emily pulled her worn backpack from under the blankets and slipped the USB into the smallest pocket. She didn't own a computer, but she knew of a place that might help the public library warm and quiet, with rows of humming desktops. It meant leaving the safety of the bridge, but she had to know what she was dealing with. The library was a mile's walk across town, past the ice-glazed sidewalks of Main Street and through the plaza where the Christmas decorations still hung in tired loops. Inside, the warmth hit her like a wave. She kept her head down as she approached the computers, mindful of the "no loitering" sign. The screen flickered to life, and with shaky fingers, she inserted the USB. Folders appeared instantly labeled with strings of numbers and dates. She clicked on one at random. A video loaded, grainy footage from what looked like a warehouse interior. Pallets stacked high with unmarked crates. Men in Whitmore freight jackets moving boxes, their faces caught clearly in the frame. In the background, a logo Whitmore's own emblazoned on a shipping container. Another file contained audio. Charles's smooth, unmistakable voice discussing delivery schedules and avoiding inspections. Even Emily, with no experience in such things, could hear the implication. Her stomach knotted. The man who had offered her $5,000 for Ranger wasn't just a wealthy businessman, he was using his company to move something illegal. And Ranger somehow had ended up with the evidence in his collar. Now she understood why Charles had found her. "Emily?" The voice startled her so badly she nearly yanked the USB out. She spun to see a tall man in a khaki sheriff's department jacket leaning against the end of the computer row. His nameplate read, Morgan. Deputy Jack Morgan was in his early 30s, with a build shaped by long days on patrol and a face weathered by the Colorado wind. His brown hair was cropped close, and his green eyes had a steady, assessing look that made people think twice before lying to him. He was known among the homeless camps for quietly slipping leftover sandwiches to kids like Emily without making a show of it. He raised a brow at the screen. "That's not something you should be looking at in public." His tone wasn't scolding, but there was a thread of warning in it. Emily's instinct was to shut down, to grab Ranger and run. But Jack had always been kind to her. He had once brought her a pair of gloves after seeing her hands cracked from the cold. She hesitated, then said, "It was in Ranger's collar. I think it's why that man came yesterday." "What man?" Jack's voice sharpened just slightly. She told him about the man in the expensive coat, the offer of money, and his parting words. Jack's jaw tightened. "Charles Whitmore," he said flatly. "Figures." Emily frowned. "You know him?" "I've been trying to prove he's dirty for years," Jack said. "But he's careful, too careful. No paper trail, no witnesses willing to talk. If what's on that drive is what I think it is—" He trailed off, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. Before she could respond, Ranger gave a low, warning growl. Emily glanced toward the library's glass doors. A man in a heavy parka was loitering outside, his hood up, face hidden. He wasn't browsing the bulletin board or waiting for anyone he was watching. The moment Emily made eye contact, he looked away, pretending to check his phone. Jack followed her gaze, his expression hardening. "Time to go," he murmured. He pulled his radio from his belt but didn't key it on. "You can't go back to the bridge for a while. If Whitmore wants that dog, he won't stop at polite offers." Emily's chest tightened. "That's my home." "It's not safe," Jack said, his voice gentler now. "Come on. I know a place you can lay low for the night." They left through the back exit, into an alley that smelled faintly of coffee grounds from the cafe next door. Ranger stayed pressed to Emily's side, his body tense. Jack led them toward the edge of town, to a squat brick building with a faded sign that read Morgan's Auto Repair, the shop his uncle had run before passing it down to him. Inside, the air was warmer than outside, smelling of oil and old leather. In the back was a small office with a cot, a heater, and a shelf stacked with canned food. "You can stay here tonight," Jack said, handing her a wool blanket. "I'll look into that drive, and Emily, don't show it to anyone else, not even people you think you can trust." She nodded, hugging the blanket to her chest. The reality was settling in now. This wasn't just about keeping Ranger safe. That little piece of plastic in her backpack could put a man like Charles Whitmore in prison, and that made her dangerous to him. That night, as the wind rattled the shop's metal door, Emily lay on the cot with Ranger curled against her. She could still see the video files in her mind, the crates, the logo, the men moving under the hum of overhead lights, and she could still hear Charles's voice, smooth as oil, talking about schedules and avoiding inspections. She didn't know how long Jack could protect them, but one thing was certain: she couldn't give Ranger up, not for any price. And now she knew why Charles would come back. The cold that night in Riverbend was sharper than any Emily had felt all winter. The wind rattled loose sheet metal on the roof of Morgan's Auto Repair, whistling through cracks in the brick like a warning. Emily lay awake on the cot in the back office, Ranger stretched beside her, the steady weight of his head on her leg the only thing keeping her calm. She had been at Jack's place for 2 days now, and while the cot and the small space heater were luxuries compared to the bridge, she couldn't shake the feeling of being hunted. Jack Morgan had been gone most of the day, chasing leads on the files from the USB. He'd taken a printed copy of the contents with him, leaving the actual drive locked in his desk. Before he left, he'd told her to stay inside, lock the doors, and keep Ranger close. She'd obeyed, mostly. Around 10 p.m., headlights swept across the cracked glass of the office window. Emily froze, thinking Jack had returned early, but the beam of light was too still idling, not parking. She rose, peering through the narrow blinds. A black SUV sat just beyond the edge of the shop's lot, the engine purring in the cold. The driver's door opened, and Charles Whitmore stepped out. He looked as composed as he had under the bridge-tailored overcoat, gloves, not a single hair out of place despite the wind cutting in from the river. In one gloved hand, he held a small black leather bag. Even from here, Emily could imagine the crisp bills inside. She slipped quietly into her coat and cracked open the side door, letting Ranger lead. The dog's hackles were already up, his eyes fixed on Charles. "Emily," Charles said smoothly, as if greeting an old friend, his voice barely raised above the wind. "You're hard to find these days." Emily kept the doorframe between them. "What do you want?" "The same thing I wanted before." He stepped closer, stopping just short of the gravel drive. "But this time, I'm making it worth your while." He unzipped the leather bag, tilting it forward so she could see the neat stacks of money inside. $20,000. Enough for a place to live, more than enough. I even have a property ready. Small house, warm, safe. You and Ranger could be comfortable there. Emily's chest tightened. $20,000 was more than she'd ever seen in her life. She pictured it, her and Ranger in a real home, a bed with clean sheets, food every day without worrying if there'd be enough. But then she saw the video again in her mind, the crates, the men in Whitmore freight jackets, and remembered Charles's voice in those recordings. Giving Ranger up meant letting him walk away free. "I told you he's not for sale," she said, forcing the words out through the lump in her throat. Charles's expression didn't change, but his eyes cooled. "You think you're protecting him, but you can't protect him from what's coming. People like me. We have ways of getting what we want." His gaze flicked briefly toward the shadows beyond the lot, and Emily caught movement, two figures lingering near the corner of the building, dressed in dark parkas. Ranger gave a deep growl, stepping forward until his shoulder brushed her leg. "You have until tomorrow night to decide," Charles said, zipping the bag closed. "After that, I can't guarantee either of you will like the outcome." He turned, walking back toward the SUV. The figures in the shadows melted away, slipping into the dark behind him. The black vehicle rolled off, tires crunching over the ice-crusted pavement. Emily shut the door fast and dropped the deadbolt, heart pounding. She rubbed Ranger's neck, more for her own comfort than his. "We're not taking it," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "We're not." While she lay awake, Jack was across town, leaning over a desk in the county sheriff's cramped records room. The place smelled faintly of coffee gone stale and old paper. Beside him sat Deputy Sarah Vaughn, a wiry woman in her late 40s with graying blonde hair pulled into a severe bun. Sarah was the department's archivist, known for her sharp tongue and sharper memory. She'd once been a field deputy until a back injury forced her behind a desk, but her mind was still quick, her network of informants intact. "You're telling me you've got actual video of Whitmore's guys moving product?" she asked, flipping through a folder Jack had brought. "Yeah, but I need more than one clip from a security camera to make it stick," Jack said, scanning a shipping manifest. "We need dates, routes, something that ties directly to him." Sarah tapped a line in the manifest. "These. 2 shipments to a warehouse in Fort Carson, scheduled after midnight, no bill of lading filed. That's your window. If you're right, he'll be moving something on that run." Jack nodded grimly. "And if Emily's right, he knows we have proof. I saw a black SUV near the shop last night. Could have been him. Could have been his people. Either way, she's in the crosshairs." "You'd better keep her locked down," Sarah said, her voice low. "Whitmore doesn't like loose ends." By the time Jack returned to the shop, it was nearly dawn. Emily hadn't slept. She told him everything about the SUV, the bag of money, the 2 figures in the shadows. Jack's face went hard. "That wasn't a friendly visit," he said. "That was pressure. He's testing you, seeing if you'll crack." "I'm not giving Ranger to him," Emily said, hugging the dog closer. "Not for anything." "I know," Jack said, his voice softening. "But you also need to be ready. If he's sending people to hang around at night, he's not far from sending them in." Jack didn't say it aloud, but the thought hung in the air between them. Charles wouldn't stop asking. And the next time, he might not bother with an offer. The storm came in just before nightfall, sweeping over Riverbend in a fury of white. By the time the wind had begun to ease, the world was muffled in thick snow, the sky a deep iron gray. Emily had been restless all day inside the cramped back office of Morgan's Auto Repair. Jack had left before dawn, chasing a lead Sarah Vaughn had dug up. Something about an unscheduled freight truck moving out of Whitmore's East Side warehouse. He'd told her to stay put, lock the doors, and wait. But Emily couldn't stand feeling trapped. Ranger was pacing too, his limp more pronounced from the cold, and she thought a short walk might settle them both. Bundling into her coat and boots, she slipped out the back, Ranger at her side. She didn't go far, just down the alley, across the old rail yard, and toward the bridge where they'd once slept. The snow crunched underfoot, and her breath formed clouds that hung in the still air. She didn't notice the movement in the shadows until it was too late. Two men stepped out from behind the concrete supports, dressed in black parkas with fur-lined hoods pulled low. Both were tall, broad, and moved with the silent coordination of men used to working together. The one in front had a thick black beard and a scar running from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone, his pale eyes locked on Ranger. The other was younger, wiry, with a twitchy energy that made his head jerk in small, constant movements. "Evening, kid," the bearded man said, his voice low and gravelly. "Boss says we take the dog. No one gets hurt." Emily's stomach turned cold. She didn't need to ask who Boss was. Ranger stepped forward, growling, but she gripped his collar, backing away. "You're not taking him." The younger man laughed, a short, unpleasant sound. "Not up to you." He reached inside his coat, and Emily didn't wait to see what he pulled out. She turned and ran. Snow flew under her boots as she sprinted toward the tree line beyond the bridge. Ranger bounded beside her despite his limp, his breath coming in white bursts. She could hear the men behind them, their boots heavy but fast. The forest swallowed them quickly, bare branches overhead, the snow deeper here, slowing her down. Emily clutched at Ranger's collar, her other hand pressed to the front pocket of her coat where the USB now lay. She'd taken it from Jack's desk that morning. She couldn't explain why, only that she didn't feel safe leaving it behind. She had to get to Jack. The forest ended abruptly at the edge of the river. The Platte was half frozen here, ice stretching from the shore toward the center, the black water moving sluggishly in the middle. The cold bit at her cheeks, and she turned to find the men closing in. The bearded man moved deliberately, his gloved hands out as if calming a skittish animal. "No one's got to get hurt, kid. Just hand over the dog." Emily's heart hammered. "No!" The younger man lunged first, too fast for her to react. Ranger broke free of her grip, his deep bark echoing off the ice. He hit the man hard, teeth snapping on the thick fabric of his coat, driving him back into the snow. The bearded man cursed, reaching for something at his belt, but Ranger swung toward him, eyes blazing. Emily seized the moment. She bolted along the edge of the river, slipping on the ice-crusted snow. Behind her, the younger man shouted, Ranger's snarls cutting through the night. She didn't look back until she heard Ranger bounding toward her again, his limp more pronounced, but his head high. Together they plunged into the deeper snow along the riverbank, weaving between the trees until the sounds of pursuit faded. Miles away, Jack Morgan was sitting in his patrol truck on a ridge overlooking a stretch of county road rarely traveled at night. Snow had already half-buried the tire tracks he'd followed from the East Side warehouse. His binoculars were trained on a lone semi-truck idling beside an old storage barn. The driver, a stocky man in a Whitmore freight jacket, was smoking by the cab while two others worked the barn doors. Jack's breath fogged the glass as he watched them roll out wooden crates and load them into the truck's trailer. No markings, no manifests, no security cameras. He keyed his radio but stopped short. Without a direct link to Whitmore himself, this was just another suspicious load. And in Riverbend, suspicious didn't hold in court. He needed more names, receipts, something tying these shipments to Charles. The truck's headlights flared, and it began to roll toward the highway. Jack made a note of the license plate, his jaw set. Back near the bridge, Emily and Ranger didn't stop until they saw the glow of the town lights through the trees. Her lungs burned from the cold air, her legs heavy as lead. She crouched behind a snowbank, pressing her forehead to Ranger's, his breath warm against her cheek. "We have to get to Jack," she whispered, though the wind carried her words away. She didn't know how much longer they could keep running, but she knew they'd have to try. The harbor at North Riverbend was an isolated stretch of industrial piers and weather-beaten warehouses. Snow had thinned here where the salt spray from the river's mouth licked at the ice, leaving slick patches that reflected the dim orange glow of the dockside lamps. Emily's breath came in ragged bursts as she jogged along the deserted access road, Ranger trotting beside her, his limp deeper after the chase through the forest. She didn't know how she'd ended up here, only that every instinct told her Charles Whitmore was going to leave town, and if he did, the proof she carried would be meaningless. The USB in her pocket felt heavier than it should. The harbor smelled of diesel and cold metal, and the creak of mooring lines echoed through the still air. She spotted movement ahead, two black SUVs parked beside a corrugated steel warehouse. The one on the right was unmistakable. It was Charles's. the same sleek vehicle she'd seen outside the auto shop days ago. A voice behind her froze her in place. "I was wondering when you'd find me." She turned slowly. Charles stood no more than 15 feet away, his overcoat buttoned tight, gloves pristine despite the damp air. His hair was neatly combed back, face smooth as if the cold couldn't touch him. Two men flanked him. One was the bearded brute from the bridge, the scar on his face stark under the dock lights. The other a new face, tall, bald, with a neck thick as a tree trunk and hands that looked like they could crush bone. His dark eyes swept over Emily with the flat disinterest of someone sizing up a package rather than a person. Charles's tone was conversational, almost warm. "You've been quite the problem, Emily, running through the woods, keeping things that don't belong to you." He stepped forward, and Ranger bared his teeth. The bearded man's hand twitched toward his coat, but Charles lifted a finger to stop him. "Let's not make this unpleasant." "What do you want?" Emily asked, forcing her voice not to shake. "You know what I want." His eyes flicked toward Ranger. "And what I need. You give me the dog and that little piece of plastic you've been holding on to, and I guarantee you'll never hear from me again. You and your pet can go live somewhere warm, somewhere quiet, or," he smiled faintly, "you can keep playing this game and someone's going to get hurt." Emily's mind raced. The money he was offering didn't matter anymore. She knew what was on that USB. If she gave it up, it would vanish into the dark, and the men in those videos would keep moving their crates. Ranger pressed closer to her leg, his body taut. From somewhere deep in the shadows came a muffled scrape, so soft she almost missed it. Then a voice, low and urgent. "Emily, down!" She dropped instantly. A shot cracked through the air, loud enough to echo off the water. The bald man staggered back, his gun clattering to the dock. Jack Morgan emerged from between two stacks of shipping containers, his sidearm steady, eyes locked on Charles. His winter jacket was dusted with snow, his face hard and set. "I'd say put your hands up, Whitmore, but I know you're too proud for that," Jack said. Charles's calm didn't falter. "Deputy Morgan, always showing up at inconvenient times." He nodded almost imperceptibly, and the bearded man drew his weapon. Another shot rang out this time from Jack splintering the dock beside the man's foot. Ranger exploded into motion, launching himself at the bearded man. The two went down hard, the man's curses drowned out by the dog's feral snarls. Emily scrambled toward the containers, clutching the USB. Charles moved to intercept, but Jack stepped in, shoving him back against the SUV. The two men grappled, the fight quick and brutal on the icy wood. Jack took a blow to the ribs but kept his footing, wrenching Charles's arm until his gun slid into the slush. Ranger broke free from the bearded man, blood matting the fur along his shoulder, but his eyes still bright and unyielding. He bounded toward Emily, placing himself between her and the chaos. Jack finally forced Charles down to his knees, cuffing him with practiced efficiency. The bald man had vanished into the maze of containers, but the sound of sirens in the distance promised he wouldn't get far. Jack rose, his breath steaming in the cold. "You okay?" Emily nodded, though her hands were trembling. She held out the USB. "This is what he wanted. It's all in here." Jack took it carefully, slipping it into an inside pocket. "Then we'll make sure it doesn't disappear." He glanced at Ranger, who stood with his head high despite the blood on his fur. "You did good, boy." Charles said nothing, his gaze fixed on the river beyond the dock. Whatever calm he had carried now looked hollow. The sirens grew louder, their wail cutting through the night, and for the first time, Emily felt a weight lift from her chest. She didn't know what came next, but she knew Charles wouldn't be leaving Riverbend tonight. Winter loosened its grip on Riverbend slowly, as if reluctant to admit defeat. The snow along the streets was now a patchwork of stubborn drifts and dirty slush, the river running freer each day. In the county courthouse 3 weeks after the dockside arrest, the case against Charles Whitmore had been swift. The files on the USB, combined with testimony from warehouse workers Jack had coaxed into talking, painted a picture so damning that even Charles's high-priced attorneys couldn't tear it apart. The verdict had come in without suspense guilty on multiple counts of trafficking and conspiracy. The sentence, 25 years in a federal facility. Emily hadn't been in the courtroom when the sentence was read. Crowds and strangers still unsettled her. But Jack had been there, sitting in the front row in his neatly pressed uniform, and afterward he had come to find her in the sunny corner of the library. He'd simply said, "It's over," and she'd known what he meant. Word of the case had spread through Riverbend. The local paper ran a feature not on Charles's downfall, but on the 10-year-old girl and her injured German shepherd, who had refused to give up the evidence that brought him down. Donations began arriving, small envelopes with $5 bills, notes scribbled on lined paper, a few bigger checks from people Emily had never met. One envelope contained only a child's crayon drawing of a girl and a dog with the words, "Thank you for being brave." Jack, ever practical, had handled the money. He told Emily there was enough for a proper place. No more cots in a back office or nights under the bridge. The search for a home led them to Margaret Maggie Olson, a wiry woman in her late 50s with silver-threaded auburn hair and a penchant for knitted sweaters in bright colors. Maggie worked for the town's housing trust and had a reputation for stretching every dollar to help people get on their feet. She'd grown up in Riverbend, the daughter of a sawmill worker, and knew every block and alley. Years earlier, she'd lost her husband in a logging accident, a grief that had made her sharper in some ways and softer in others. When Jack explained Emily's situation, Maggie pursed her lips, then smiled. "I think I have just the place. It's not fancy, but it's solid, and it has a yard." 2 days later, they stood in front of a small, pale blue cottage on the edge of town. The paint was chipped in places, the porch sagged a little, but the roof was sound, and the windows caught the afternoon light. A cedar tree in the side yard cast long shadows across the snow. Emily stepped inside cautiously. The air smelled faintly of wood polish and something floral lavender, maybe. The living room was small but bright, with worn hardwood floors and a window seat that looked out toward the river in the distance. There was a kitchen with a chipped but clean counter, a bedroom just big enough for a bed and a desk, and a back door that opened onto a fenced yard where Ranger immediately began sniffing every corner. "It's yours, if you want it," Maggie said, leaning on the doorframe. Emily swallowed hard. It's perfect." Settling in took time. Jack brought over a donated couch and a table he'd rescued from a storage shed. Maggie appeared with curtains and a box of mismatched dishes. A neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor Price, a stout woman with a shock of white hair and a laugh that carried, came by with a casserole and insisted on meeting Ranger. She'd lived alone since her husband passed, and her habit of checking in each morning became a quiet comfort for Emily. Ranger's leg injury was the last thing to address. Jack arranged for Dr. Benjamin Hale, the town's only veterinarian, to take a look. Dr. Hale was in his 40s, with sandy hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a calm, deliberate way of moving that seemed to reassure every animal he touched. He'd served as an army vet before opening his practice, and his hands still bore faint scars from years of working with nervous dogs. "It's going to take surgery and a few months of rehab," Dr. Hale explained, crouched beside Ranger. "But I think he'll run again." The operation went smoothly. For weeks afterward, Emily followed the vet's instructions to the letter: short walks, physical therapy exercises, plenty of rest. Ranger was patient with the process, though his eyes lit up every time they passed the yard gate as if asking when he could really run. By early spring, the limp had faded to a barely noticeable hitch, and his stride had regained its old confidence. One evening, Emily sat on the porch steps, watching the sun dip behind the hills. Ranger lay at her feet, head resting on his paws. Jack pulled up in his truck, climbing out with 2 steaming cups of cocoa. "You've got neighbors talking," he said, handing her one. "They've seen you working with Ranger out back. Maggie says you've got him doing drills." Emily smiled. "I want to be ready. I think I want to be a canine handler when I'm older, like my dad was. Ranger deserves to keep doing what he's good at, and I want to help other people the way he helped me." Jack's face softened. "That's a good goal, and with what you've been through, I'd say you're already halfway there." They drank their cocoa in companionable silence, watching the last light fade. A few days later, on a warm afternoon that smelled faintly of thawing earth, Emily walked with Ranger to the Riverbend Bridge. The ice was gone from the water, replaced by the slow swirl of spring currents. She stood at the spot where she used to huddle under blankets, looking out at the town beyond. Back then, she'd stared at those lights wondering if she'd ever belong anywhere again. Now she knew she did. Ranger sat beside her, tail thumping softly against the wooden boards. She scratched behind his ears. "We're okay now," she said quietly, "and we've got work to do." As the sun sank low, painting the river in streaks of gold and crimson, Emily turned toward home. Not the bridge, not a borrowed cot in a shop office, but her home. Ranger trotted beside her, strong again, eyes bright. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a shadow. It felt wide open. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is hold on to what is right, even when letting go would be easier. Emily and Ranger's journey reminds us that loyalty, courage, and standing up for the truth can change not just our own lives, but the lives of others around us. In everyday life, we may not face dangerous docks or hidden evidence, but we do face moments where choosing integrity matters. If this story touched your heart, please share it so others can be inspired. Leave a comment with your thoughts and subscribe to our channel for more stories of hope and resilience. May God bless everyone who watches, and may He guide you in your own moments of decision. If you believe in the power of truth and loyalty, comment Amen below.